Minister, I'd like to welcome you to the House today, and I'd like to welcome the fact that we're taking another important step forward today towards real equality in this country. And I'd like to join with Senators Backett and Moran in welcoming visitors to the gallery, groups that have worked over a long period of time to achieve the end to discrimination that we're talking about today. I think it's hard to believe in 2013 that a person still has to fear that they could be discriminated against by an employer solely on the grounds that they're lesbian, gay or bisexual, or because they're an unmarried parent, separated, divorced or cohabiting outside marriage. But unfortunately, this is still very much the case for teachers, doctors and other staff of religious-run schools. As other senators pointed out, under current Irish law, bodies may discriminate against employees on the grounds that their sexual orientation, gender identity, marital status or family status is a threat to the religious ethos of the institution. Thus, employees may be paid not because of anything that they've actually said or done in their workplace, but simply because of who they are. It is utterly unacceptable to me, and I think it should be equally unacceptable to all of us, that publicly funded institutions can discriminate against employees or potential employees on such grounds. As senators are aware, the current situation is a particular source of unhappiness for LGBT staff. Many teachers have told me how the current legislation has made them feel that they have to hide their sexual orientation from their colleagues. They've told me that day in, day out, they go into school and they pretend to be somebody else. They go in on a Monday morning after the weekend, and while other colleagues are talking about how they spent their weekend and about their families, they just kind of quietly sit there and don't engage in the conversation. And they even go to great lengths not to be seen socialising with their long-term partners in the town in which they work in their own time. It really, really angers me that people who are great at their jobs and respected by their students and their parents are being made to feel so unhappy at work. They should be judged on the same basis as everybody else, their effectiveness in the classroom, not on somebody on a prejudiced view of their sexual orientation. And given that more than 95% of our schools are denominational patronage, it's not as if they can avoid this threat by seeking employment elsewhere. Freedom of religion is an important factor which I fully respect, but it should not, however, be used to permit discrimination unacceptable and illegal in any other employment, especially by institutions that are state-funded. The current position also has a profoundly negative impact on LGBT young people, robbing them of positive role models at a difficult time in their own lives. While things have improved a lot over recent years, many gay teenagers still experience a deep sense of unhappiness, isolation and depression as they struggle to come to terms with their own sexual orientation. And despite the incredible work being done by groups like Belong To, LGBT young people are still 4 times more likely to take their own lives than their peers. A lot of valuable work is being done at present to tackle homophobic bullying, and I welcome in particular the importance that Minister Quinn has attached to this issue over the last 2 years. But what message does it send to LGBT young people and to their friends that as a society we still condone legalised discrimination against teachers solely on the grounds that they're gay? So I very much welcome the bill that's before us today. I think that it provides an opportunity for us to unite on a cross-party basis and end this discrimination for once and for all. But I do have a number of concerns about the current wording. I appreciate that it has been drafted to strike a careful balance between competing constitutional values of freedom of religion on the one hand and equality and the right to earn a livelihood on the other. And I also understand that striking that balance isn't easy, because we had to do a lot of work in drafting our bill last year to make sure that it would be constitutional. So I can understand, for example, the motivation behind exempting fully private institutions. As I don't think it's within our power to say that there should be female priests in the Catholic Church, so I can understand where that part of the legislation is coming from. But I am worried about whether the protection for staff of publicly funded institutions in the current draft is strong enough. This time last year, I published a Fianna Fáil bill to amend Section 37 of the Employment Equality Act, and that bill unequivocally stated that nothing in Section 37 could be relied on by an institution to justify or permit discrimination or to allow to be taken against any employee or employee on the basis of that or person employees or potential employees' civil status or sexual orientation. The effect Thank you. The effect of this wording was that schools and hospitals would still be entitled to insist that staff members demonstrate respect towards their ethos in the workplace and not actively seek to undermine it. But they wouldn't be able to discriminate against conscientious employees just because they don't approve of, for example, orientation. The protection afforded by that wording was clear and unconditional. By contrast, the wording before us today still permits discrimination in some circumstances. It states that taking action against an employee should be deemed discrimination unless, and I quote, by reason of the employment concerned or the context in which it is carried out, the action taken is objectively justified by legitimate aim and the means of achieving the aim are appropriate and necessary. I appreciate that the onus is on the employer to show that they can satisfy this provision, but I am concerned about the fact that it's there. I accept, as I said, that staff should be required to respect the ethos of their employer and not actively seek to undermine it, but I personally don't accept that there are any circumstances in which an employer should be able to take action against employees solely on the grounds of their sexual orientation. This bill foresees that there are, and I would like clarity as to what those circumstances are, what members in drafting the bill felt, why you felt the need to include that provision. Because I think the acid test for any proposed new legislation is simple. Will a teacher reading the new provisions be able to take comfort from them? Will they be able to read it and say, I'm safe? I'm genuinely concerned that the wording before us today doesn't give the kind of unequivocal guarantee that Senator Moran referred to in her own speech. We're supporting the legislation because I do think that it's a step forward. We're only at second stage today, and I'm looking forward to the opportunity of working with members on all sides at committee stage to strengthen the wording and to ensure that it does actually give people the protection that they need and that they deserve. I'd just like to ask one question before I finish, and that's because when we discussed this legislation last year, Minister Shatter made progress conditional on the new human rights body doing a public consultation process. I tabled an adjournment debate 2 weeks ago to ask if that was still the position, because that body still hasn't been established. And I was told that it was still the position and that the body would be established shortly. So I'd like to know if this legislation going to the next stage and actually completing its passage through this House is still conditional on that process, because there's been a huge delay on merging those authorities. And I think all of us would like to see that we could work together to get this legislation through as soon as possible and not be held back by that process. So I'd like to get clarity from that because it hasn't been mentioned so far.